Morning, everybody. Father Jason here, coming live from the Church of the Nativity in Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia. Continuing our chapter by chapter walk through the Gospel according to Luke. Today we're on the 13th chapter of Luke's Gospel, and we continue. If you've been reading along with us, you've seen this arc of tension between Jesus and the powers that be, those in charge, and it continues to rise here in the third chapter. In the middle of the chapter, there's a story of Jesus teaching in the synagogue on the Sabbath, and there's a woman there who stooped. From the description of it, it sounds like she has severe osteoporosis. She stooped over and can't stand up straight. And he heals her in the synagogue on the Sabbath. Now, this is interesting for right off the bat in that it's a woman, because in the synagogue, men and women were separated, and they prayed in separate spaces. So how did Jesus see her and know that she was there if he wasn't already breaking down barriers and putting his eyes and himself in a position where he could see her? So that's already a break with convention right there. But then he heals on the Sabbath, and the leaders, the synagogue leaders, were indignant, and they told the people, "There's 6 days in the week. Bring your sick to Jesus to be healed those 6 days. Don't do it on the Sabbath." They don't say that to Jesus; they say it to the people. And Jesus responds back. He gets enraged. He says, "You hypocrites! Do not each of you on the Sabbath untie his ox and his donkey from the manger and lead it away to give it water? And ought not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan bound for 18 long years, be set free from this bondage on the Sabbath day?" See, the Sabbath had been created as holy, which means other, as different, as a day of rest to bring about life. It was an expression of God's righteousness. God's righteousness in the Old Testament is not a checklist. Do this, don't do this. It's not a checklist that gives us clear bullet points to check off and know that we've done the right thing. Rather, it's a characteristic of God's capacity and God's action to bring about life for others. God doesn't have to create. God doesn't have to bring about this world. God doesn't have to bring Israel out of bondage. God doesn't have to raise up prophets in Israel. God doesn't have to do these things to express God's love for us, but God does them, and God doesn't have to do these things at all, but yet does them, and it brings about life for others. Therefore, the Sabbath is meant to bring about life. However, the Pharisees, the scribes, the religious leaders of the day were very pious. I want to be very careful here and not seem like I'm Pharisee bashing, because I'm not. I think they made an interpretation that if they could get people to be pious, it would finally end the exile, and the kingdom of David would emerge again by the power of God. So they were attempting to be faithful. However, it got used to the point that it was more about control and controlling the people. Instead, Jesus is wanting to bring life to the people. And we've seen throughout history, those that want to bring life to the common people are always repudiated by the powers that be, those that are in charge. So we're seeing that go more and more. It gets up to a high point at the end when Jesus starts talking about Jerusalem. He says, "Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. How often have I desired to gather your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wing, and you were not willing." Again, the prophetic tradition is full of prophets being rejected in Jerusalem, the cultural, religious, and political center of the ancient Hebrews, and Jesus knows what's going on there. He's headed straight there. He's headed there, and he knows what's going to happen to him, and yet he still goes. He's about his business. Just before Jesus starts talking about that and saying this, having this compassionate moment, despite feeling compassion for the very people and the very place where he's going to die. Right before that, there's a story of Pharisees coming to him and saying, "Get out of town, go away. Herod is trying to kill you." Now, it seems like that Herod is the bad guy and they're blaming things on Herod. Um, and maybe and certainly Herod was not excited about Jesus by any means, but I think they want Jesus to stay away just as much uh, uh, as Herod, as we will go on to see. Um, so it's a little bit of a shell game going on there. But Jesus responds, "You go tell that fox, I'm going to be teaching and healing today, tomorrow, and the next day. I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. I'm not going to sway from what God has called me to do and what God is telling me to do and my purpose here. I'm going to stay focused on that. And yes, I'm bringing life to the people. And yes, that's going to cost me my life. I know this. Jerusalem is the place that kills the prophets. We're going there." And there's a determination there that should be inspiring to us, that no matter what the price, no matter what the cost, we should be about bringing life for others, even when the powers that be do not want us to. So that's what's going on in the 13th chapter of Luke. I hope you're enjoying this journey. If you have thoughts, questions, or comments, please post them in the various social media comment sections where we're posting these videos. And keep reading. We're over halfway through. We're just going to keep plugging along, and we'll get to the end on Christmas Eve. Again, I'm Father Jason from the Church of the Nativity in Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia. And remember, God loves you more than you could possibly imagine.